Breaking. For years, the public was told that everything there was to know about Jeffrey Epstein had already come out. We were told the most powerful names were protected, that the most sensitive documents would never be seen, and that the story was finally over. But with the release of what are now known as the Epstein Files, that narrative is beginning to collapse. Because even behind heavy redactions and blacked-out pages, one thing is becoming impossible to ignore. Someone is still trying to control what the world is allowed to see. On Friday, the United States Department of Justice released tens of thousands of records connected to the Epstein investigation. Photographs, contact lists, flight logs, internal memos, court documents, business records. At first glance, the sheer volume of material suggested transparency, but a closer look quickly raised a far more troubling question. If this is transparency, what exactly is being hidden? The release followed more than a year of sustained political pressure, something rare in an era of deep partisan division. Lawmakers from both parties pushed for the full disclosure of government records tied to Epstein. At the center of that effort were two representatives from opposite sides of the political spectrum who used an unusual procedural move to force a vote on the House floor. Their goal was simple: compel the government to comply with the law and open the files. That law, signed in November, required the Department of Justice, the FBI, and U.S. attorneys' offices to release all unclassified records related to Epstein within 30 days. The deadline expired on December 19th. What the public received, however, fell far short of expectations. Much of the release material was heavily redacted. Names, locations, dates, and entire passages were obscured under the justification of protecting victims or safeguarding ongoing investigations. In theory, the law allows such redactions, but it also requires something critical. Every redaction must be accompanied by a written justification and submitted to Congress, and this is where serious concerns began to surface. Critics of the release argue that the issue is not simply whether files were made public, but whether the most important information was selectively withheld without explanation. Key documents, including a draft federal indictment and witness interview memoranda, were notably absent. These are the very records that could have shed light on whether others helped enable or cover up Epstein's crimes. For survivors, the stakes are deeply personal. This is not about public curiosity or political theater. It is about accountability, about knowing who knew, who helped, and who remained silent. When files are released in fragments, the message feels clear. The truth is still being filtered. Among the newly released images, several immediately drew attention. Old photographs, many grainy and poorly lit, show Epstein alongside influential figures. In multiple images, women appear with their faces deliberately obscured. One former U.S. president appears in several of these photos, including images showing him near Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, the woman later convicted of recruiting underage girls for abuse. The response from representatives was swift. Statements emphasized that appearing in photographs does not imply criminal wrongdoing, dismissing the images as misleading and irrelevant. But the real issue is not who appears in the photos. It is why these images remained hidden for so long, and why they are emerging now, still incomplete. The Department of Justice has insisted that this release is only the beginning. Officials say hundreds of thousands of additional documents will be released over the coming weeks. They argue that careful review is necessary to protect victims from further harm. A federal judge has also ordered prosecutors in New York to review the materials before additional disclosures are made. While that explanation carries weight, it has not eased public skepticism. Many believe protecting victims should never come at the cost of shielding those who may have benefited from Epstein's network. The line between necessary caution and deliberate obstruction feels increasingly blurred. At the same time, the House Oversight Committee has launched its own parallel effort. After issuing a subpoena to the Epstein estate, the committee began selectively releasing emails, documents, and images taken from a much larger archive. According to committee members, these files come from a collection of approximately 95,000 images extracted from Epstein's email account and personal computers. Some of these images feature high-profile business leaders, political operatives, and public figures in settings previously unknown to the public. Once again, many identities remain redacted, but the broader picture is becoming harder to deny. Epstein did not operate alone, and his reach extended into powerful circles. This brings back a question that has never been fully answered. How did a man accused of such serious crimes manage to maintain access to political, financial, and cultural elites for decades? How did he secure such lenient legal treatment in the past? And perhaps most unsettling of all, who still has reason to fear what these files might reveal? Epstein's death in federal custody, officially ruled a suicide, has always been surrounded by unanswered questions. Broken cameras, missing guards, procedural failures. Now, with the files being released in pieces, those doubts feel more alive than ever, not because definitive proof has emerged, but because the sense that the full truth remains out of reach has only intensified. Each new document raises more questions than answers. Every blacked-out line fuels suspicion, and paradoxically, the more the government insists on caution, the stronger the perception becomes that the real story has yet to be told. What is clear is that the Epstein case did not end with his death, nor with the conviction of Ghislaine Maxwell. It evolved into something larger, a test of how far transparency goes when power is involved. A case study in how systems can repeatedly fail when confronted with money, influence, and silence. The Epstein Files, even in their incomplete form, reveal an uncomfortable truth. Not only about one convicted offender, but about the structures that allowed him to operate for so long without meaningful consequences. And as more documents are promised, one question continues to linger, more disturbing than any name hidden beneath black ink. When everything finally comes out, will the public be ready for what these files truly reveal? Because one thing is already clear. The names nobody was supposed to see are still there, and someone, somewhere, is still fighting to keep them in the shadows.